Good afternoon, Mackinac Policy Conference. I'm Christy McDonald. So I'm not sitting at a desk in the parlor of the Grand Hotel. I'm sitting in my basement. But all this week with the Detroit Regional Chamber, we've been having a virtual Mackinac Policy Conference, looking back at some of the impactful speakers and talking about what happens next for all of us as a region. Dennis Archer Jr., Ryan Maibach, and Stacy Fox will be joining me to talk about development, jobs, and recovery, and the realities that we're all facing now. But first, let's take a look back at two conversations from Mackinac past. One is between Dan Gilbert and Dennis Archer Jr., and then a presentation from Amy Liu.
What does Detroit look like to you in 15 or 20 years from now?
Well, man, if we get it right, and we can just keep the awfulizers to a minimum, and not give them the sort of undue credit they get because of the internet. When you have a handful of people who are creating noise, and 99 or 98% of the people think the other way, they get a lot of airtime, and it sort of skews people's belief of how people think and believe. So we keep that to a minimum, and we continue to create a great culture, and the city and the state keep going in the right direction, and the overall economy does well. I mean, Detroit in 15, 20 years, even less than that, could be, and it's on its way now to being one of the best cities, not just in downtown, but in the neighborhoods and everywhere else. And it's a story that people are going to tell because, once this thing, and it is catching fire, right? Once it catches the kind of fire that is happening right now, and people start believing, if you think about what's going on now, there's only really, I don't know, maybe you can count 10 or 12 substantial investors in the private sector in the city right now. Now you get to be 100 or 200 of them. And believe me, every day we're hearing it from all over the country and even the world, people calling us up, we want to get involved, we're hearing about Detroit. People are more optimistic about Detroit outside of Detroit almost.
Right.
Which is crazy because I think it always was you always were defensive, now you say something about Detroit, somebody from New York wants to say, what are you talking about, right? So I think that it could be, every city's different, so I never like to say it's going to be the next Chicago or the next this, next that, next Toronto, because every city's different, but it could be a very, very special place with the main thing is that we have optimism and hope, young people, whether they're from the city, raised in the city, or they're the surrounding area, that they're just, what, I need to go and get to Detroit because that's where the action is, that's where the excitement is, that's where the opportunities are.
A lot of people would consider what you've done in your approach as fearless to a certain extent, but what does, if anything, what does Dan Gilbert fear, or what keeps you up at night?
I fear when people start losing hope and people, you can't get more and more people excited about things, and I think that hasn't happened. We're going the right direction. I want to make sure I say that, but people say, well, it's fearless or it's bold. I mean, somebody once told me anybody who dies with money in the bank is a failure. If you think about that, why would you want to die with money in the bank? I mean, if you were blessed with a fortunate position to have capital and also the ability to get things done, why wouldn't you want to impact the world around you as much as you possibly can?
It's not just the job of employers and economic development professionals, but also leaders in community development, in workforce, in land use, in higher ed. Now, I know that historically, growth players they don't think their mandate is inclusion. And the equity people didn't trust market actors, given legacy practices. But if we are to meaningfully achieve inclusive economies, these actors and systems must align, they must coordinate, they must work together, and we are beginning to see that happen in cities. Greater inclusion must result in improving opportunities by place within metropolitan areas. No child or young adult's life chances should be limited by the neighborhood in which they live. Yet despite economic expansion, Metro Detroit has experienced an increase in the number of high poverty neighborhoods in the city and the suburbs, as the chart and the map show. So too many families live in neighborhoods that hamper their upward mobility. So the bottom line is that Michigan and its cities have been effective in reinvigorating economic growth post-recession. No question about that. Now the task is to ensure that that growth translates into greater productivity and inclusion. And the absence of doing so will mean that the growth that has been created will be shallow, will be short-lived, because we're ignoring the structural barriers to increasing the potential of more people and firms in our community. Leaders can also revitalize a network of innovation corridors, neighborhood job centers, economic hubs throughout a city and metro, so residents, no matter where you live, can be close to opportunity. And there is a role for public policy and civic action to spur business dynamism, helping small, mid-sized firms survive and expand through periods of disruption. Rather than simply attract companies, we could create entrepreneurship ecosystems or help existing manufacturers make productivity improvements, which can result in operational cost savings, higher revenues, better wages. The solutions to economic inclusion, they're local. And it is within cities that separate funding streams and separate programs are knitted together to empower people, place, and businesses. It is within cities that leaders prize problem solving over partisanship. It's where trust and collaboration is built. Now, in an era of great uncertainty, there's one thing that is certain. Cities with states and their local public-private sector partners, they will lead the way in creating an America that expands opportunity for all.
Really interesting pivots from hope and desire to invest to the realities of what we're facing in terms of job training, unemployment, and the need for services. All right, let's bring in our panel right now. Dennis Archer Jr., he's the CEO of Ignition Media Group, founding partner of Archer Corporate Services. Dennis, it's good to see you.
Good morning.
Also with us is Ryan Maibach. He is the president and CEO of Barton, Malow Holdings. He's also the chair of the 2020 Mackinac Policy Conference. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Christy, good to be with you.
And Stacy Fox, she is the founder and principal of the Roxbury Group. Hi, Stacy.
Hi, Christy. Thanks for having me.
You know, it's great to have you all here in this group, and I think we're all missing that interpersonal Mackinac Island Policy Conference experience. Let me ask each one of you, just kind of first off, how important we've all realized, I think, in the last 11 weeks of being in person and having those conversations and those discussions, making those deals is something that we're all kind of missing right now. I'm going to start with you, Dennis.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all found that we're able to be more productive, I believe, in this era. I know me, for one, I've been able to be probably more productive in terms of work output in a day. But
Really?
A lot of things that, Ryan and Stacy both understand as entrepreneurs is that a lot of building business is through building relationships and trust with the people with which you work. And so that gets amplified times 100 when we're up on the island. And so a lot of the value associated with the Mackinac Policy Conference year over year is being able to be up close and personal with the people that you want to do business with, shape policy with, et cetera. And so I, for one, am missing that and always look forward to going up to Mackinac.
Yeah, Stacy, how have you found the change and what have you found that you've missed a little bit without being in the same room?
Right. Well, it's funny because, as Dennis said, in a way, this has allowed us to accomplish things that we otherwise didn't accomplish. I mean, that my two fellow panelists, Ryan and Dennis, I've been working with both of them on frankly, reopening businesses. In the case of Ryan, reopening construction, and with Dennis, food and beverage and restaurants. So we've actually, gotten involved in things and initiative and met with people that I might not have in the crush of the normal schedule. So that's been good, but there's no replacing what the Mackinac Conference allows you to accomplish. I mean, we'd go up there every list with a list of 12 people we needed to see and get answers from and get things done, and we always ticked through the list, and it was very efficient. We also miss our regular Thursday cocktail hour that we have on the porch of the yacht club. So we're having to do that virtually as well.
It's different. You talk about the accessibility of people that are now able, you can reach them actually probably a lot quicker than you have been before because people are pretty much in one space. But Ryan, talk a little bit about how the change has been for you in interpersonal relations.
Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of the comments that Dennis and Stacy made in that, there's opportunity to connect with people potentially easier. Many of our schedules have been cleared. We don't have to contend with travel and whatnot. But just even to chime in on the past question, I mean, I would agree with Dennis and Stacy that I think we all went to Mackinac with intentional lists of relationships or people that we were looking to connect with. But as I think back on my time up at Mackinac,
And the part that I think I missed the most is the chance encounters, the random interactions that you weren't really looking for, but really bore some tremendous fruit, and just some really outstanding stories and just neat things that came from a lot of those chance encounters, just reflective of the power of the group that's up there. So it is, it's definitely, it's a bit sad this week that we're not able to do that.
Well, now we're all in this this different reality, and moving forward, we all have a lot of big issues in terms of business development, where we are as a city and a region, and how we're going to move forward. It seemed that we had gotten so much momentum in the city of Detroit and in Southeast Michigan in general, and now we're faced with a whole host of different issues that we're going to have to attack. So I'd like to ask each one of you, and kind of step back first, how would you describe where Detroit and Southeast Michigan had come to up until March 10th, and now the new problems or the new challenges that we're going to have to tackle in this time now at the end of May? And Dennis, let me start with you.
Well, if you listen to what Dan said in 2016 about trying to limit the awfulizers, and he also spoke to a vision where we moved from, at that point, 10 to 12, as he I think stated it, significant investors downtown, to a day where maybe there's 100 or 200. I'm not sure what the count is now. Stacy may have a better idea of that, but it is definitely closer to the 100 than it is at 10 or 12. So I think in this past 4-year period, since we sat on that stage, we have come a long way. And I think if you couple his vision with what Amy Lou talked about in terms of what it takes to achieve the goal that we wanted to achieve, how civic organizations, political leadership, higher ed, philanthropy, civic institutions, et cetera, all need to be aligned and working together. We have that alignment. I mean, since Stacy was deputy in charge of our bankruptcy process, we became aligned then, and we have not become uncoupled since then. All of those organizations, and you loop in just the Detroit community, the residents of the city, all seem to be, since bankruptcy through now, in my opinion, in lockstep. And even getting through this COVID situation that we're experiencing now, you see once again, all of those stakeholders coming together to keep our momentum moving forward. So from where we've come from then to now, I think is incredible. I think we have a long way to go. I think you still see, you saw more announcements this week in terms of the Gilbert Hudson Block project. You see things happening in the neighborhood. And the other thing, and then I'll pass it on to another one of our panelists, that I think was key in Dan's comments was he talked about in being the best city we can be, he specifically mentioned it has to include the neighborhoods. We cannot have a city come back when the comeback is only in the 7.2 square miles of the greater downtown area. And I think that you see this administration and all of the other stakeholders, philanthropy, et cetera, developers, focusing on taking their game into the neighborhoods. That ultimately is going to make for a phenomenally improving Detroit, and that evolution will continue.
Ryan, what about from your vantage point? I mean, how would you describe where we've been in a region up until March when the pandemic hit, and then some of the challenges that now that we're going to have to face coming out of this?
Yeah, I would say, I think first off, it in many ways what we've been doing is running a marathon, and I think hey, there's different phases, and it really spans over the marathon for us is really over a span of years, and I think that to Dennis's point, great progress has been made, in particular using one of the words that Dennis used in alignment, and I think that alignment has been very, very critical and is a base that we can really leverage as we now try to navigate some of the challenges that COVID-19 has presented. I think we're already seeing that in what's happened with DPS-CD. I think the crisis has created a sense of urgency, and coupled with the alignment has been able to make some things like getting of young people in the city in ways that would have been really challenging to accomplish 6 months ago. So certainly not looking to diminish any of the challenge that COVID-19 has presented, but I think it does present opportunity to accelerate movement in some particularly urgent or critical areas.
Yeah, Stacy, what about from your vantage point?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I agree with Ryan's comment that it's certainly presenting challenges, but also an opportunity. And I think the challenge is we don't quite know yet how the balls are going to stop bouncing here. I mean, those of us who are in small business in Detroit and those of us in development, this has definitely been a bit of a setback, and we don't know when and how we're really going to hit our momentum in terms of retail, bars and restaurants, hotels yet, because of so many things have changed downtown. The events and when those will come back and how they'll come back, conferences and conventions, casinos. I mean, the city is losing $600,000 a day from the casinos being shut down. The way people work, will people come back to their offices in the same numbers? And what does that impact on small business and the revenues of city income tax of these workers who now aren't working in the city? So there's a lot of things I think we don't know yet in terms of what the lasting impact. But the other thing I would say is we made great strides. And as Dennis pointed out, I was honored to be part of the bankruptcy team. And we came out in 2014 with a restructured balance sheet, and we were just getting our momentum on development. And we have just, we have not stopped for the last 6 years. That being said, it's been a bit of a demonstration project. Everybody worked together and did a phenomenal job of turning the lights back on and really starting to focus on some of the challenges of the neighborhood. But it was still fragile, and it was fragile before the pandemic. And so now we have to just be careful about taking anything for granted down here. And I would have said that before we even hit this, this real bump in the road. But development was already slowing, as these guys both know. Costs were rising, rents weren't rising. It was getting, frankly, harder to get deals done, not easier. So, but I think kind of the good news or the silver lining of the crisis is that we now have to coalesce around our future growth agenda. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And we can't take it for granted, because those that were taking it for granted realize now that with this setback, it's just all hands on deck, and we've got to be 100% focused.
So I think that speaks to the alignment that that Dennis was talking about. But people look at that and say business was so active in helping invest. Philanthropy was so active in helping invest. And Ryan, you talked about making sure that school kids at DPSCD now have the technology to be able to do the homeschooling. People could be concerned, though, with this economic hit that has come out of the pandemic, will there the capital be there to be able to invest and hold up and push agendas and be able to help with development and moving forward, because there are so many unknowns, Dennis?
Yeah, so the capital question is both, I look at it, both from an equity side and a debt side. I think that Stacy is probably aware, because I'm sure, like I do, has different projects at different stages. And I will say that the debt side of the market, I wouldn't say that it's frozen, but it's come to a turtle's pace, because the banks are being very cautious right now. A lot of the banks are unclear as to how their commercial real estate landlord clients are going to fare coming out of here, because you have tenants that saying they can't pay or won't pay, but landlords have bank covenants and other responsibilities, and so banks are trying to keep their dry powder to the greatest extent that they can. On the capital side, I still think that in the equity side, I still think you have a tremendous amount of interest. I still get calls all throughout this 8 or 10 week period from people still interested in coming into the Detroit market. But once they get here, identify, apply the land, identify an investment, can they then put together a capital stack to allow them to get that done? And I think that is going to be slow for the next few months until banks are comfortable that their existing client base is healthy, and then they can go back into the market making loans.
Yeah, it's continuing to sell and boost the city. Ryan, what would your 2 cents be on that?
I've been pleasantly surprised over the course of the last 2 months, the number of projects that we have been involved in that have continued to move forward, and in a couple of cases actually accelerated, which is very positive. So I think as we were trying to figure out what all this meant for our business, we were very concerned that new work in pipeline in particular would come to a screeching halt. But that hasn't been the case, which is certainly encouraging. But I do think, we've used that word uncertainty now several times. I think that's really our biggest challenge as we navigate the future, is just that the amount of uncertainty in play is, I'm concerned, starting to bog things down a bit.
Yeah, and just in terms of where the flexibility is going to be able to come to be able to manage some of that. We're running out of time. That we have about 30 seconds left. Stacy, you get the last word here for us.
Yeah, I would just say that on the capital, one of the things I think we need to do as we come out of this is look at the tools that we have available, and those that have always been available to encourage development in Detroit, the different kinds of tax credits, the patient equity. And I know Invest Detroit and the Detroit Developer Roundtable are working with the city and Invest Detroit to make sure those tools are there so that we really can continue this next chapter of growth.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this segment of our Mackinac Policy Conference live stream virtual this week. It was great to see all of you. Dennis Archer Jr., Stacy Fox, and Ryan Maibach. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.